The organ music is swelling, filling the vaulted ceilings of the cathedral with a sound that's supposed to be joyous. To the 300 guests sitting in the pews, I probably look like the picture-perfect bride. My Vera Wang dress cost more than a mid-sized sedan, my hair is pinned back with heirloom pearls, my veil is a cloud of expensive silk tulle. From the back, I am a vision of a woman about to start her happily ever after. But as I stand at the heavy oak doors, waiting for the signal to walk down the aisle, my hands aren't shaking from nerves. They are steady. They are cold. I can feel the weight of the small black remote tucked into the hidden pocket of my dress. It's a custom edition I asked the seamstress to make last week. She thought it was for a digital inhaler. She was wrong. I look at my father. He looks so proud. He has no idea that the man waiting at the end of this aisle spent $60,000 of my money on another woman in the last 6 months alone. My father squeezes my arm, whispering that I look beautiful. I can't speak yet. If I open my mouth, the sheer venom I'm holding back might actually burn someone. I start the walk. The wedding march kicks in, that iconic, repetitive beat that signals the beginning of the end. Every step I take on this white silk runner feels like a countdown. 10, 9, 8. I see Liam now. He's standing there in his bespoke tuxedo, also paid for by me, looking like the leading man in a romance movie. He's even doing that thing where he pretends to wipe a stray tear from his eye. The crowd sighs. They think it's love. I know it's a performance. He's looking at me, but he's probably thinking about the offshore account he thinks I don't know about. Or maybe he's thinking about Chloe. I glance to the left. There she is, my maid of honor, my best friend since sophomore year of college. Chloe is wearing a blush pink dress that complements her skin tone perfectly. She's holding my bouquet of lilies like they're a sacred relic. She catches my eye and gives me a tiny, supportive mouth. I love you. It's sickening. I can still smell her perfume, the one Liam bought her for anniversary. Of their first hookup, clinging to the fabric of my own bridal suite this morning. They think they are so smart. They think the quiet, hard-working Asian girl with the high-yield savings account is too focused on her spreadsheets to notice the blood in the water. We reach the altar. My father hands me over to Liam. Liam takes my hand, and his skin feels like a reptile's. He leans in and whispers, "You're finally mine, Maya." I almost laugh. The priest starts the ceremony. The usual fluff about love is patient, love is kind. I look at the giant LED screens on either side of the altar. They are currently displaying a soft focus slideshow of our engagement photos in Paris. Images of us kissing under the Eiffel Tower. Images of us holding hands in the Louvre. It's all a lie. In about 5 minutes, everyone in this room is going to see the real slideshow. They are going to see the bank statements. They are going to see the high-definition doorbell camera footage of Chloe entering our apartment at 2 a.m. while I was on a business trip in San Francisco. They are going to see the text where Liam calls me a boring ATM, and Chloe laughs about how they're going to spend the wedding gift money on a villa in Bali. My heart is a drum in my chest, beating a steady rhythm of pure, unadulterated spite. I've spent 3 years building a life with this man. I've spent 5 years sharing my deepest secrets with that woman. Today, I'm not just canceling a wedding. I'm dismantling 2 lives with the surgical precision of a woman who knows exactly how much a betrayal costs, down to the very last cent. The priest reaches the part about if anyone knows any reason why these 2 should not be wed. This is the moment. Usually, this is a formality, a beat of silence, but I don't wait for someone else to speak. I reach into my pocket. I feel the plastic button. I look Liam dead in the eye, and for the first time today, I give him a real smile. It's the smile of a predator who has finally cornered its prey. I have a reason, I say. My voice isn't loud, but in the sudden shocked silence of the cathedral, it sounds like a gunshot. The priest freezes. Liam's brow furrows in confusion. Maya? What are you doing, babe? I'm showing everyone the tribute video we prepared, Liam. I say, my thumb hovering over the button. I think the guests deserve to see the full story of our relationship. Don't you? Chloe's face goes from blush pink to ghostly white in 3 seconds. She knows. She knows I know. Liam is still trying to play it off, reaching for my arm, trying to calm me down in front of the witnesses. But I'm already pressing the button. The screen flickers. The image of the Eiffel Tower vanishes. But let me back up. 'Cause to understand how we got to this altar, you have to understand exactly how much work I put into making sure Liam felt safe enough to rob me blind. Liam and I met during my final year of grad school. At the time, I felt like a machine, all logic, code, and caffeine. I was finishing my master's in computer science, and my social life was a ghost town. Then came Liam. He was a free spirit, a muralist who lived in a loft that smelled like turpentine and expensive coffee. He was everything I wasn't: spontaneous, loud, and seemingly unimpressed by the corporate ladder I was so desperate to climb. Looking back, I realized that my success was the very thing that drew him to me, but at 22, I called it balance. I was the anchor, and he was the sail. I thought he brought color to my gray world of algorithms. By the time I landed my first six-figure job at a major tech firm in the city, Liam was already moving his canvases into my apartment. He didn't ask. He just slowly encroached, one paint-stained rag at a time. I didn't mind. In fact, I liked taking care of him. There was a certain ego boost in being the provider, the strong Asian woman who could handle the bills while her partner pursued pure art. My parents, traditional immigrants who valued stability above all else, were skeptical from day one. My mother would look at his paint-splattered jeans and whisper in Cantonese, "A man who cannot feed himself will eventually eat your heart." I laughed it off as old-world cynicism. I told her he was a genius who just hadn't found his market yet. Then there was Chloe. Chloe had been my person since we shared a dorm room at Stanford. She was the one who helped me study for my systems architecture exams, the one who held my hair back when I had too many shots after finals. She was bubbly, blonde, and came from a family with old money that had long since run dry. She had the taste of a billionaire and the bank account of a retail clerk. I felt sorry for her, in a way. I was the one who made it out, who built a career, while she drifted from one marketing coordinator job to another. I made it my mission to include her in my success. If I went to a high-end gala, Chloe was my +1. If I bought a designer bag, I'd give her my old one from the previous season. I thought I was being a good friend. I didn't realize I was feeding a parasite that was slowly growing resentful of the hand that fed it. The dynamic of our trio was established early on. I was the bank, the planner, and the safety net. Liam and Chloe were the creatives. They would sit on my Italian leather sofa, drinking wine I paid for, and talk about the soullessness of corporate life. They mocked the very world that provided the roof over their heads. I would just smile, tired from a 10-hour shift of debugging, and feel grateful to have such vibrant people in my life. I started giving Liam a monthly stipend so he could focus on his art without the distraction of a part-time job. I even set up a joint account for household expenses. It was supposed to be for groceries and utility bills. The first red flag should have been the wedding planning itself. When Liam proposed, with a ring I later found out he put on a credit card he expected me to pay off, he insisted on a grand celebration. He said he wanted the world to see how much he loved me. I wanted a courthouse ceremony and a nice dinner, but Chloe stepped in as the wedding consultant. She told me I owed it to my heritage and my status to have the wedding of the year. She spent hours with Liam, looking at venues, tasting cakes, and selecting floral arrangements that cost more than my first car. They were always together, huddled over iPads, whispering about visions and aesthetics. I was too busy working overtime to cover the escalating costs to notice how their planning sessions often lasted until 2 in the morning. I remember one specific night, about 8 months before the wedding. I came home late from the office, exhausted. The apartment was dark, except for a single candle burning in the kitchen. I found Liam and Chloe sitting very close together, looking at a spreadsheet of floral costs. When I walked in, they jumped apart. Chloe's face was flushed, and Liam immediately started talking about peonies versus ranunculus with a frantic energy. I was so tired, I just assumed they were stressed about the budget. I actually apologized for interrupting them. I told them to keep working and I went to bed, feeling guilty that I wasn't present enough for my own wedding preparations. As the months went on, the expenses became astronomical. Liam claimed he needed a private studio to create a massive triptych for our ceremony. He found a space across town, a luxury loft that cost $4,000 a month. I paid the security deposit and the first 6 months of rent without even visiting it. He said he needed solitude for his process. Meanwhile, Chloe's consulting fee was supposedly being waived out of the goodness of her heart, yet she was suddenly wearing new designer shoes every time I saw her. When I asked her how she afforded them, she'd laugh and say she found a great deal on a resale site. I was blinded by my own desire to be the perfect partner and the perfect friend. I saw myself as the protector of their dreams. I took pride in the fact that my hard work allowed them to live these beautiful, untethered lives. I didn't see the whispers behind my back. I didn't see the way Liam looked at Chloe when he thought I was checking my emails. I didn't see that I wasn't the protagonist of my own life. I was just the financier for theirs. They weren't just taking my money. They were mocking my work ethic, calling me the drone in their private messages. They viewed my bank account as a communal pot and my trust as a weakness to be exploited. The setup was complete. I was locked into a schedule of payments, a series of non-refundable deposits, and a social expectation that was spinning out of control. I was the golden goose, and they were already sharpening the knife. But the thing about being a drone is that you're very good at processing data, you're very good at spotting patterns, and eventually the numbers stopped adding up. The studio rent was being paid, but Liam hadn't bought a new tube of paint in months. Chloe was unemployed, yet she was taking weekend trips to visit family that seemed to coincide perfectly with Liam's art retreats. The foundation was cracked, and for the first time in years, I stopped looking at the vision they were selling me and started looking at the cold, hard facts. The first crack in the facade wasn't a dramatic confession or a lipstick stain on a collar. It was a line item on a credit card statement. As a software engineer, I live in the world of logic and precision. My brain is wired to notice anomalies, and the anomaly I found was a charge for $422.15 at a boutique lingerie shop in Soho called L'Amour Caché. I didn't recognize the name, and I certainly didn't own any silk teddies from a French boutique. When I asked Liam about it, he didn't even blink. He looked me straight in the eye with that charming, boyish grin and told me it was a surprise for our honeymoon. "I wanted to get you something that made you feel as sexy as I see you, Maya," he said, pulling me into a hug. "But I guess the cat's out of the bag now. Happy early wedding present." I felt like a monster for even questioning him. I felt like the cold, calculating woman my parents worried I'd become. I kissed him, thanked him, and tried to ignore the fact that he hadn't asked for my size. But once you see one bug in the code, you start looking for others. A week later, I noticed a pattern in our household joint account. Every Tuesday and Thursday, there were cash withdrawals of exactly $300. When I brought it up, Liam claimed he was paying his art assistant in cash to help prep the canvases for the wedding triptych. "Art is a gig economy, babe," he'd say, dismissively. "Not everyone wants a W-2. It sounded plausible enough if you didn't thinking about it too hard, but I was starting to think very hard. I decided to visit his private studio across town. I wanted to surprise him with lunch, maybe see the progress on the massive painting that was supposed to be the centerpiece of our reception. When I arrived at the luxury loft building, the doorman didn't recognize me. I told him I was Liam's fiancé. He gave me a look that I can only describe as pity mixed with confusion. He let me up. I stood outside the door of Suite 4B, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could hear music playing inside, jazz, the kind Chloe loved. I knocked. The music stopped instantly. It took a full 2 minutes for Liam to open the door. He was shirtless, wearing paint-splattered jeans, but his skin was bone-dry. There was no smell of turpentine. There was no massive triptych in the center of the room. In fact, the room was mostly empty, save for a very expensive-looking velvet sofa and a half-empty bottle of Cristal on the floor. "Maya, what are you doing here?" he stammered. blocking the doorway. He looked panicked, like a cornered animal. I peered past him. I wanted to see the art, Liam. Where is it? He spun a lie on the spot. Something about the lighting being wrong and having to move the canvases to a specialized drying facility. It was the most transparent bullshit I'd ever heard. I looked at the sofa. There was a silk scarf draped over the arm, a very specific shade of blush pink. It was the exact scarf I had gifted Chloe for her birthday 3 months ago. My stomach did a slow, sickening flip. Is Chloe here? I asked, my voice dangerously thin. Liam laughed, a forced, jagged sound. Chloe? Why would she be here? She's probably at a fitting or something. You're being paranoid, Maya? Is this about work? Are you stressed? He tried to usher me back toward the elevator, talking a mile a minute about creative blocks and pressure. I let him lead me away, not because I believed him, but because I realized that if I confronted him then, I would only have a scarf and a bottle of champagne as evidence. He'd find a way to twist it. He'd call me crazy, tell our friends I was controlling, and I'd lose the upper hand. I went back to the office, but I didn't work. I sat in my glass-walled cubicle and began to do what I do best. I began to audit. I used my access to our shared accounts to trace every cent. I found that the art retreats Liam took were actually bookings at 5-star resorts in the Hamptons. And every time he was away, Chloe's social media would go dark. No posts, no stories, no location tags. For someone who lived for digital validation, her silence was deafening. Then came the second phone. I found it by accident while I was looking for a charging cable in Liam's gym bag. It was a cheap prepaid burner. It wasn't locked. I opened the messaging app, and icy determination. There were hundreds of messages, neon pain. There were hundreds of messages, photos, videos. The dates went back 14 months. They weren't just sleeping together. They were laughing at me. Chloe had sent him a photo of the Vera Wang dress I'd picked out. She'd taken it during my fitting while I was in the changing room. The caption read, "She looks like a stuffed dumpling in this. Can't wait to see your face when you have to pretend to like it. Just think of the offshore account, baby. Almost there." Liam's reply, "You're the only bride I want. This is just a business transaction." Once the marriage license is signed and that first anniversary trust kick-in happens, we're gone. Let the drone keep her spreadsheets. We'll keep the cash. I sat on the floor of our walk-in closet, the burner phone glowing in the dark, and I didn't cry. I felt a cold, crystalline stillness settle over me. They weren't just cheating. They were planning a long-term financial execution. They were waiting for the anniversary trust, a fund my grandfather had set up that would release a massive lump sum to me and my husband after 1 year of successful marriage. They didn't just want my salary. I wanted my inheritance. They had calculated the cost of my heartbreak and decided it was a price they were willing to let me pay. The tension in our house became unbearable, but only for me. I had to become an actress. I had to come home and let Liam kiss me. I had to go to brunch with Chloe and listen to her talk about bridesmaid bouquets while I knew she had been in my bed 48 hours prior. I started noticing the little things I'd missed before, the way they'd share a look over the dinner table, the way Chloe would touch his arm accidentally and leave her hand there a second too long. Every time it happened, I felt a surge of bile in my throat, but I forced it down. I needed more than just texts. I needed a paper trail that would hold up in a way they couldn't wiggle out of. I began to record everything. I installed a small, undetectable camera in the living room, disguised as a smart home hub. I didn't have to wait long. Within 3 days, I had high-definition footage of them on my sofa, drinking my wine, mocking my boring personality, and planning how they'd split the money after the inevitable divorce. Chloe was worried about the prenup. Liam told her not to worry. She's so desperate for me to love her, she'll sign whatever I put in front of her as a gesture of trust. I've already got the amendment ready. He was right about one thing. I was a drone. I was precise. I was disciplined, but he was wrong about the desperation. He had mistaken my kindness for weakness and my silence for ignorance. As the wedding date approached, the tension in my chest felt like a coiled spring. I wasn't just planning a wedding anymore. I was building a cage, and I was going to make sure the door locked from the outside. I spent my nights at the office, not coding for the firm, but coding a script that would scrape Liam's private cloud storage. I found the folder. It was titled Project Freedom. Inside were scans of my own financial documents, my passport, and a forged power of attorney form he'd been practicing my signature on. He wasn't just planning to leave me, he was planning to identity theft me into bankruptcy. The betrayal was total, it was architectural. And as I sat there, watching the progress bar on the file transfer, I realized that a simple breakup wouldn't be enough. I didn't want him gone. I wanted him destroyed. I wanted Chloe to watch the life she tried to steal vanish into thin air. The breaking point didn't happen when I found the burner phone, or even when I saw the forged power of attorney. Those were intellectual betrayals, data points that my brain could categorize and file away under threats. The moment that truly broke the last remaining piece of my heart. The moment that turned my cold anger into a searing white-hot desire for total annihilation happened exactly 10 days before the wedding. It was the night of my surprise. Bridal shower, an event meticulously planned by Chloe. The party was held at a rooftop lounge in the city, paid for, of course, with the event planning credit card I had entrusted to her. All my female relatives were there, my aunts, my mother, and even my grandmother, who had flown in from Hong Kong. These were women who had survived wars, poverty, and displacement. They looked at me with such immense pride, seeing me as the culmination of all their sacrifices. I sat there in a white lace dress, opening gifts, while Chloe stood by my side, acting as the perfect doting maid of honor. She made a speech that brought half the room to tears, talking about how I was the sister she never had, and how Liam was the luckiest man alive to have found such a pillar of strength. As she spoke, she rested her hand on my shoulder. I could feel the heat of her palm through the lace, and it felt like a brand. I looked at the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist, a vintage find, she called it. I knew now it was the same one that had appeared on my Amex statement as a lighting fixture deposit for the wedding. She was wearing my money, standing in a room paid for by my labor, telling my family lies to their faces. But the true breaking happened after the party. I had stayed late to help the staff pack up the leftover favors, while the rest of the group headed to a bar down the street. I was walking toward the service elevator when I heard voices coming from the darkened terrace. I stopped. I knew those voices. God, I thought she'd never stop opening those kitchen gadgets. Chloe's voice rang out, sharp and dripping with contempt. There was the distinct flick of a lighter. I don't know how you do it, Liam. Having to touch that pillar of strength every night, I felt like I needed a shower just standing next to her. It's a job, Chloe. Just a job, Liam replied. His voice was different than I'd ever heard it. The boyish charm was gone, replaced by a flat, clinical coldness. She's like a laptop. You use it, you plug it in, you get what you need out of it, but you don't love the hardware. I just have to get through the vows, sign the papers, and then we're on the clock for the trust fund. 1 year. That's all we need to play nice. 1 year is a long time to watch her smug. I worked hard for this face, Chloe spat. Did you see her mother looking at me like I'm some kind of peasant? They really think they're better than us just because they can code a few lines of gibberish. It's pathetic. She's so focused on being the provider, she doesn't even realize she's just our personal ATM. She's a drone, babe. Drones don't have feelings. They have protocols. Liam laughed, and I heard the sound of a kiss, a long, wet, familiar sound. Besides, the amendment I'm having her sign tomorrow, it's genius. I told her it's a life partnership protection document to ensure her family's assets stay in her name if something happens to me. In reality, it gives me full discretionary control over her investment accounts the second the marriage is consummated in the eyes of the law. She won't even read the fine print. She'll just be happy I'm taking an interest in the finances. You're a devil, Chloe whispered, giggling. My handsome, talented devil. I can't wait to see her face when she realizes her master's degree didn't make her smart enough to keep her own husband. I stood in the shadows of the hallway, clutching a box of leftover macarons, and I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a loud break. It was silent, like a glass filament shattering in a vacuum. Up until that second, a small, pathetic part of me had been looking for an excuse to forgive them. Maybe Liam was just confused. Maybe Chloe was just jealous. Maybe we could just cancel the wedding and move on. But hearing them laugh at my mother, hearing them mock the very intelligence I had used to support them, hearing them plan to rob me of the legacy my grandfather had built for me, that was the end of Maya, the balanced partner. That was the end of the girl who wanted to be liked. I didn't confront them. I didn't burst out onto the terrace and scream. Instead, I turned around and walked back into the lounge. I sat down at a table, took out my phone, and opened my banking app. I watched the numbers on the screen. To them, those numbers were freedom. To me, they were ammunition. I realized then that if I just called off the wedding, they would move on to the next victim. Liam would find another drone. Chloe would find another best friend to bleed dry. They were predators who viewed the world as a buffet. If I wanted to stop them, I couldn't just leave the table. I had to poison the food. The next morning, Liam brought me the life partnership protection document over breakfast. He was wearing his sweet fiancé mask, the one with the soft eyes and the gentle touch. He poured me coffee and told me he'd been thinking about our future. I want to make sure your family is protected, Maya, he said, sliding the papers across the table. I know how much your grandfather's legacy means to you. This ensures that I can never touch the principle of your trust unless it's for an emergency we both agree on. I looked at the document. It was exactly what I'd heard them describe, a predatory legal trap disguised as a gesture of love. He'd even used a font that looked official and academic to appeal to my sensibilities. I looked at him, and for a fleeting second, I wondered if he felt any guilt at all. I looked for a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. There was nothing, just the hungry, expectant look of a man waiting for his check to clear. You're so thoughtful, Liam, I said, picking up a pen. I didn't sign it, though. I made a small, deliberate smudge on the signature line. Oh, I'm so clumsy. Let me take this to the office and have my paralegal friend look over the formatting. You know how I am about clean documents. I'll bring a fresh copy home tonight for us to sign together. His face tightened for a fraction of a second, a glitch in the matrix, but he forced a smile. Sure, babe, no rush, as long as it's done before the big day. I left the apartment that morning, and I didn't go to the office. I went to a high-end private investigation firm I'd retained the week before. I handed them the burner phone, the cloud storage logs, and the footage from my living room. I don't just want a report, I told the lead investigator. I want a digital forensic breakdown of every dollar he's stolen. I want the names of the hotels. I want the timestamps. And I want it all formatted into a video file that can run on a standard LED display. I spent the rest of the day with my lawyer, not a paralegal friend, but a shark who specialized in high net worth fraud. We didn't just look at the prenup. We looked at the laws regarding theft by deception. We looked at the contracts Liam had signed for the studio and the art retreats, all of which were in my name, but funded by diverted household cash. By the time I drove home that evening, the plan was fully formed. I wasn't going to sue him. I wasn't going to report him to the police. Not yet. Those were drone moves. I wanted something more visceral. I wanted to see the moment the light went out of his eyes. I wanted Chloe to feel the weight of every designer item she'd stolen from me as it became an anchor dragging her into social and financial ruin. As I pulled into the driveway of our expensive apartment, I saw Chloe's car parked out front. They were probably inside right now, celebrating their genius. I took a deep breath, adjusted my bride-to-be mask, and walked inside. I had 7 days left until the wedding. 7 days to pretend I was a victim. 7 days to make sure that when the hammer dropped, it would crush them both completely. The breaking point was over. Now, it was time for the build. The thing about people like Liam and Chloe is that they are fundamentally lazy. They aren't masterminds in the way a strategist or an engineer is. They are simply opportunistic. They rely on the discomfort of others to get what they want. They bank on the fact that most people are too polite, too embarrassed, or too in love to call out a lie. They had spent years using my emotional labor as their primary resource, but I was no longer an emotional being. I was a system architect, and I was about to redesign their reality into a prison of their own making. The first part of the plan was the financial bleed. Up until now, I had been the one tightening the belt, worried about the escalating wedding costs. I changed tactics overnight. If they wanted a lavish wedding to serve as the backdrop for their victory, I was going to give it to them, but I was going to make sure every single cent was tied to their names, not mine. I sat Liam down and told him that my parents were impressed by the life partnership document, which I had replaced with a dummy version that looked identical but was legally toothless. Since we're all protected now, I told him, I want to go all out. I want this to be the wedding Chloe dreamed of for us. Let's upgrade the guest list. Let's get the top shelf open bar. Let's hire the 4K live streaming crew for my relatives in Hong Kong. Liam's eyes practically turned into dollar signs. He thought I was finally loosening up. I told him that since my liquidity was tied up in the new investment accounts we discussed, he should put the new deposits on his personal credit cards, the ones I had secretly paid off the month before to give him a fresh line of credit. I'll reimburse you the day after the wedding with the trust fund money I promised. He didn't hesitate. Within 48 hours, he had charged nearly $80,000 in upgrades to his own name. The premium floral wall, the imported champagne, and the high-end LED screens that would eventually become his gallows. Next was the Chloe trap. I knew Chloe was the one driving the offshore account idea. She was the one with the expensive tastes and the connections to shady wealth management. I went to her and acted like a frantic, overwhelmed bride. I told her I was worried about the tax implications of my grandfather's trust fund. I need to move a significant portion of it somewhere quiet before the wedding so the government doesn't take half, I whispered over lunch. I watched her practically salivate. I have a cousin in the Caymans who handles this kind of thing for high net worth individuals, she offered, her voice smooth as silk. He's very discreet. I can set it up for you, Maya, for us. As your maid of honor, I want you to have peace of mind. I thanked her profusely. I even gave her a starting deposit of $50,000. What she didn't know was that the deposit came from a high-interest business loan I'd taken out in her name, using a power of attorney she had unwittingly signed months ago when I told her I needed her authorization to book her travel for the bachelorette party. I wasn't giving her my money. I was giving her a debt she would never be able to discharge in bankruptcy. While they were busy spending money they thought was mine, I was busy with the digital execution. I spent my lunch hours at the office with a specialized PR firm that handled crisis management. But I wasn't there to manage a crisis. I was there to create one. I provided them with the tribute video I was building. I didn't just want the church to see the affair. I wanted the world to see the fraud. We curated a digital press kit that included the recordings of them mocking my family, the screenshots of the forged documents, and the receipts of the studio. That was actually their love nest. The most technical part of the plan was the LED integration. The cathedral where we were getting married used a state-of-the-art AV system. Liam had insisted on it so he could show artistic visuals during the ceremony. 2 days before the wedding, I met with the AV technician, a 22-year-old kid who looked like he lived on energy drinks. I handed him a $5,000 cash tip and a specialized USB drive. The groom wants to surprise the bride with a secret video, I told him. It's hard-coded to override the main feed the moment I press a specific Bluetooth remote. Don't mention it to him. He wants it to be a surprise for the whole congregation. The kid nodded, dazzled by the cash. He didn't ask questions. He didn't realize he was installing a digital guillotine. The final step was the extraction. I spent the last 48 hours before the wedding systematically removing myself from our shared life. I moved my jewelry and essential documents to a private safe deposit box. I changed the passwords on all my personal accounts. I even redirected my direct deposit to a new private bank. On the surface, I was the blushing bride-to-be, attending the rehearsal dinner and letting Chloe toast to my generous heart. Inside, I was already gone. I was a ghost in the machine, watching two parasites prepare for a feast that would never come. The morning of the wedding, I stood in the bridal suite and watched Chloe zip up my dress. She was wearing a pair of diamond earrings that Liam had bought with my household money. She looked at me in the mirror and said, "You deserve everything that's coming to you today, Maya." "I know," I replied. And for the first time in months, I wasn't lying. I looked at the life partnership protection document sitting on the vanity. Liam had signed his copy that morning, thinking he was finally locking in his control over my life. I picked it up and tucked it into my bouquet. It wasn't a contract, it was a confession. I had spent 3 years being their drone, their ATM, and their punchline. But as I walked toward the cathedral doors, I felt a strange sense of calm. The code was written, the system was live. There were no more bugs to find. I had ensured that by the time the sun went down, Liam would be responsible for nearly $100,000 in immediate wedding debt. Chloe would be under investigation for financial fraud and identity theft, and their reputation in the city, the artistic social circle they so desperately craved, would be incinerated. They wanted to use my wedding as a business transaction. Fine. I was just making sure the transaction was finalized. I checked the remote in my pocket one last time. The LED was green, ready for input. The music started, the deep, resonant thrum of the pipe organ. I saw my father waiting for me. I saw the guests turning their heads, and way down at the end of the aisle, I saw Liam. He looked so confident. He looked like a man who had already won. He had no idea that he wasn't standing at an altar. He was standing on a trapdoor. And I was the only one with the key. The walk down the aisle felt like it was happening in slow motion, but not for the reasons people usually describe. There was no bridal glow, only the cold, hard focus of a sniper. Every face I passed, the tech colleagues, the distant cousins, Liam's artistic friends who had spent years drinking my wine, felt like a witness to an execution. I reached the altar, and the priest began the ceremony. Liam took my hands. His palms were sweaty, a sign of his own excitement for the payday he thought was minutes away. He looked at me with a practiced, soulful gaze, leaning in to whisper, "We're almost there, Maya. Just a few more minutes." He thought he was comforting me. In reality, he was confirming his own sentence. The priest reached the homily, talking about the sacred bond and the transparency of spirit required for a marriage. I saw Chloe standing just a few feet away, holding my bouquet with a smug, self-satisfied smirk. She caught my eye and winked. It was the ultimate insult, a gesture of shared victory between the two people who had spent 14 months dismantling my soul. I waited. I let the priest finish his sermon. I let him reach the pivotal question. If anyone here knows any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, let them speak now, or forever hold their peace. The silence in the cathedral was heavy. Expect it. Usually this is the part where the guests cough or shift in their seats, waiting for the formality to pass. But I didn't let it pass. I stepped back from Liam, pulling my hands out of his. The movement was so sharp, so deliberate, that the priest actually stumbled over his next word. "I have something to say," I said. My voice wasn't a scream. It was a clear, resonant bell that cut through the silence. Liam's smile faltered. "Maya, what are you doing? This isn't the time for a speech, honey." "Oh, it's exactly the time, Liam," I replied. I reached into the hidden pocket of my dress and pulled out the small black remote. "You see, everyone here thinks they're attending a wedding, but they're actually attending a premiere, a documentary, if you will, about the cost of a business transaction." I pressed the button. The two massive LED screens on either side of the altar, which had been displaying a soft static image of white roses, suddenly flickered. The cathedral lights dimmed automatically, part of the surprise programming I'd paid the AV kid to set up. A high-definition video roared to life. It didn't start with flowers. It started with the doorbell camera footage from our apartment. The date and time were burned into the corner. Tuesday, 2:14 a.m. The congregation gasped as they saw Chloe, wearing a silk robe I had purchased for myself, opening the door for Liam. They saw them fall into each other's arms in the hallway. The audio was crystal clear. "Is the drone asleep?" Liam's voice echoed through the stone cathedral. "She's in San Francisco for the week," Chloe's voice replied. "She's working double shifts to pay for the dream wedding, remember?" They laughed, a cruel, sharp sound that seemed to bounce off the stained glass windows. Liam's face went from confusion to a sickly gray-green pallor in seconds. "Turn it off," he hissed, lunging toward the AV booth at the back of the church. "Maya, stop this. This is a mistake. It's a deepfake. Sit down, Liam," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "The controls are locked, and we're just getting to the best part." The video cut to a split screen. On one side, a series of bank statements appeared, highlighted in red. It showed the studio rent payments being diverted to a luxury hotel in the Hamptons. On the other side, it showed text messages from the burner phone. The entire church watched as the messages scrolled by. "She looks like a stuffed dumpling in this dress. Just think of the offshore account, baby. She's a drone. Drones don't have feelings." The sound in the cathedral was deafening, not from the video, but from the collective intake of breath from 300 people. My mother let out a sharp, strangled cry. My father stood up, his face contorted with a rage I had never seen before. Chloe tried to run, but my bridesmaids, 3 girls from my engineering firm who I briefed the night before, stepped into the aisle, physically blocking her exit. She was trapped, in her blush-pink dress, her mouth hanging open like a landed fish. "You wanted everyone to see how much you loved me, Liam," I said, walking toward the edge of the altar so I could see the guests. "Well, here it is. This is the love you bought with my money. This is the partnership you signed for this morning." I pulled the life partnership protection document from my bouquet and held it up. Liam thought he was signing a document to control my assets. What he actually signed was a confession of his intent to commit financial fraud, witnessed by his own hand. I turned back to Liam. He was shaking now, his leading man facade completely shattered. He looked small. He looked pathetic. "The anniversary trust you were waiting for? It doesn't exist for you," I told him, my voice loud enough for the back pews to hear. "I've already filed for a total annulment on the grounds of fraud, and since you insisted on putting the last $80,000 of wedding expenses on your own credit cards, well, I hope the flowers were worth it, because I'm not paying a single cent." I looked at Chloe. "And Chloe, that offshore account in the payments, the $50,000 you thought you were stealing, that was a loan taken out in your name using the power of attorney you signed for the bachelorette travel. You're not a millionaire, Chloe. You're a felon. The police are waiting in the vestibule to discuss the identity theft charges." The chaos was absolute. Liam's parents were shouting at him. My aunts were hurling insults in 3 different languages. The priest stood frozen, his Bible still open to the passage about love being kind. I didn't wait for the end of the video. I didn't wait for the police to lead them away. I reached up, unpinned the heavy heirloom veil from my hair, and let it drop onto the floor. I looked at Liam one last time, the man who thought I was a laptop to be used and discarded. "The hardware just upgraded its security, Liam," I said. "And you've been permanently deleted." I turned around and walked back down the aisle. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked with the steady, measured pace of a woman who had successfully debugged her entire life. As I reached the heavy oak doors, I signaled the AV kid one last time. The tribute video ended with a final slide, a high-resolution photo of the Project Freedom folder from Liam's own computer, followed by my new bank balance. I walked out into the sunlight. My driver was waiting. My bags were already in the car. I wasn't going to a honeymoon. I was going to a private villa in Kyoto that I'd paid for with the money I saved by not paying for Liam's art retreats. Behind me, the bells of the cathedral started to ring, not for a wedding, but for a fire alarm. Someone had pulled it in the chaos. It was the perfect ending. The whole lie was burning down, and I was the only one who had made it out of the building. The flight to Kyoto was the quietest 11 hours of my life. For the first time in 3 years, there was no hum of anxiety in the back of my skull. I didn't have to check a joint account to see why $500 had vanished. I didn't have to wonder why my fiancé wasn't answering his phone. I sat in first class, sipping a glass of vintage Krug, the real stuff, not the sparkling wine Liam used to buy while claiming it was top shelf. And I watched the sun rise over the Pacific. I felt light. I felt clean. But while I was finding my peace in a Zen garden, the world I had left behind in the cathedral was still smoldering. The fallout was more systemic than even I had anticipated. When you humiliate someone that publicly, the shockwaves don't just stop at the church doors. Within 48 hours, the wedding massacre video, as the local tabloids called it, had gone viral. I had made sure the press kit was delivered to the right people the moment I stepped into my getaway car. Liam's reputation as the sensitive, misunderstood artist was incinerated. It turns out that the art community, even the pretentious circles he ran in, doesn't have much tolerance for a man who uses a woman's heritage and hard-earned career as a punchline. The gallery that was supposed to host his post-wedding solo show canceled his contract by Monday morning. They issued a brief, icy statement saying they do not align themselves with individuals who engage in financial exploitation and fraud. Liam tried to call me from 3 different burner phones. I didn't block him immediately. I wanted to see the desperation. His voicemails went from, "Maya, let's talk about this like adults," to, "You've ruined my life, you cold-hearted bitch," within 12 hours. He was staying in a cheap motel because I'd changed the locks on our apartment, which was in my name, and the private studio had been seized by the landlord for non-payment. Remember those reimbursements I promised him? Since he had put the wedding upgrades on his own cards, he was now sitting on $92,000 of high-interest debt, with no gallery show, no drone to pay his bills, and a credit score that had plummeted into the basement. He was effectively radioactive. Last I heard, he was back in his hometown, living in his parents' basement and working at a car wash to make the minimum payments on his legal fees. Chloe's downfall was even more clinical. The loan I took out in her name wasn't just a trap. It was a mirror. It forced the authorities to look at her entire financial history. Once the police started pulling the thread on the identity theft charges I'd initiated, they found a pattern. It turned out I wasn't her first victim. She had been consulting for several wealthy families, skimming off the top and using their credit info to open small, short-term lines of credit. My case was just the biggest. Because the amount involved, the $50,000 Cayman deposit and the diverted wedding funds, it was bumped up to a felony. The last photo I saw of Chloe was a grainy paparazzi shot of her leaving the courthouse. She wasn't wearing blush pink silk anymore. She was wearing a cheap suit from a discount rack, her blonde hair unwashed, looking every bit the desperate grifter she had always been beneath the designer labels I'd bought for her. She was sentenced to 18 months in a minimum security facility and ordered to pay full restitution. Since she has no assets and no career, she'll be paying me back in small, pathetic increments for the rest of her life. Every month, I get a check for $75 from the state's Victim Compensation Fund. I don't need the money. I donate it to a charity that helps immigrant women start their own businesses. It's a monthly reminder that I won. My parents, surprisingly, were the ones who took it the hardest at first. My mother cried for 3 days, not for Liam, but for the shame of the public spectacle. But then, something changed. My father, the man of few words, sat me down after I returned from Japan. He didn't mention the wedding. He just handed me a folder. It was my grandfather's original ledger from when he first started his business in San Francisco. "You didn't just protect the money, Maya," he said in Cantonese. "You protected the spirit of the work. You are not a drone. You are the architect. Your grandfather would have been proud of your precision." That was the only validation I ever needed. As for the anniversary trust, it stayed exactly where it belonged, in a high-yield investment account under my sole name. I used a portion of it to buy a small, beautiful house in the hills, far away from the artistic lofts and the social climbers. I stripped my life of the parasites and found that I actually enjoyed the silence. I still work in tech, but I started my own consulting firm. I'm known now as the woman you hire when you need to find the unfindable leak in a system. People are a little afraid of me. They know I don't miss the details. They know I don't play games. A year to the day after the wedding, I found myself back in the city. I was walking past a small community park when I saw a man sitting on a bench, sketching on a cheap pad. It was Liam. He looked older, thinner. The comp genius spark long since extinguished. He didn't see me. He was too busy looking at the ground, waiting for someone to notice his art. I felt a momentary flick of something in my chest. Not pity, not anger, just a cold recognition. I realized that for 3 years I had been the one providing the light that made him look bright. Without me, he was just a shadow. I kept walking. I had a meeting with a new client, a woman who had built a massive empire and was worried about a friend who was getting too close to her books. I smiled as I checked my watch. I was exactly on time. I'm no longer the girl who seeks balance by carrying the weight of others. I am the woman who knows the exact value of her own time, her own heart, and her own legacy. The code of my life is now clean, optimized, and secure. And the best part? I'm the only one with the administrative rights. If you're out there and you feel like the drone in your own life, if you feel like the person everyone counts on but no one respects, just remember one thing. The person who builds the system is the only one who truly knows how to tear it down. Don't be afraid of the break. Sometimes the only way to fix a corrupted file is to delete it entirely and start again. I took a deep breath of the city air, my heels clicking firmly on the pavement. I didn't look back. I had a new system to build, and this time the architecture was perfect.